وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The last time I was here, the world was still somewhat normal, but it's changed about 20 times since then. Since then, my view of the world has shifted greatly. There were many concepts that I had in my mind, but through experiences, it lands into your heart. Every year, as we all do, we cried for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and we remembered his sacrifice. And we said, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum. And we'd often ask ourselves, what would we have done had we been there on that night when Abu Abdullah sat with his companions, the night of Ashura, and he told them, they don't want you, they only want me. And you can leave. And you're guaranteed paradise. You were not disloyal. You stayed with me the entire time, but you can leave. They could have left and received paradise. He told them, leave in the middle of the night and no one can see you, and he would remain alone. How did they respond? أَنَبْقَى بَعْدَكَ, we remain after you. لَا طَيَّبَ اللَّهُ الْعَيْشَ بَعْدَكَ, there is no life after you, Ya Hussein. Even if they are to kill us and burn us and throw our ashes into the wind, then revive us and kill us and burn us and throw our ashes into the wind 70 times, 1,000 times, we never leave you, Ya Hussein. And the morning came when each one of them would go out and face their destiny. They knew that was the final day of their lives. They saw 30,000 in front of them, and they knew. And Imam al-Hussein could have stopped it all with one word. You could have said to Yazid, Ubayya'uka, I give you the bay'ah. That was it. He decided that this was a time of making a stand. That this was the time where Islam itself was in jeopardy. And so we took from this lesson an eternal sacrifice of justice and honor and courage and valor. And then we see in our current age how the story of Karbala inspires our people. And the different personalities in Karbala are followed as examples. So you see a young man who barely has a beard, who isn't even married yet, would go and give his life in protection of his people, of his land, of his religion, of his culture. Just like Al-Qasim or Ali al-Akbar. You'll find the older men sacrificing themselves for their families, just like Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. And you'll find mothers, older ladies, who give their sons, one son, 2 sons, 3 sons, some mothers, even 4 sons, following the example of al-Banin. And that archetype of al-Shaheed, the mother of the martyr, you can see it in today's age. These people are living the example of Karbala. This is not far from home. In the last 3 months, I think the count of my friends that I lost reached 20. 20 of my friends were martyred. My teacher was killed. My cousin was killed. My village was flattened. Everything gone. Dunya-wise, you start from zero. Dunya-wise, everything you build, your home, your car, whatever it is that you have, dunya-wise, struck. Fine. Dunya, forget dunya. But the people that you lose, till now, the people of Lebanon, the Shia of Lebanon. And I say Shia because I want to explain how this relates to all of us beyond the borders of Lebanon. It's not because I'm Lebanese. That the Shia of Lebanon are removing martyrs from the rubble as we speak, till now, till today. We're still finding out who's missing and who's not missing. The other day I found out one of my friends was a martyr. He died 2 weeks ago. No one even knew. He was under the rubble. Yesterday my friend was cleaning his house. He found a hand in the house. He doesn't know who it belongs to. It was a woman's hand, a feminine hand, and he buried it. We don't know who it's for. These people were targeted because they believe in what you believe in. Because the powers that be have a problem with your theology. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam has proven to be a thorn in the eye of the oppressors, and so effective even till today, because the people don't take it just as a story. They live this, and they continue to live this. That's why in 2006, the idea was to gather all of the Shia, put them on a ship and take them to Iraq to change the demographics of the land, because they kept proving to be very difficult opponents and ruining all the imperialist plans. Because of the Shaheed and the mother of the Shaheed by which we take our inspiration. And so these people have a responsibility that they've given us for us to be a part of what's happening in helping them and defending them with a voice or a prayer, in the minimum financially, so that they're not crippled in the way that they were forced to be homeless. The women and children of the defenders of your shrines. The reason why you've been able to go see Sayyidah Zainab in the last 14 years, and why you can go to Karbala and Najaf, because of these people. And so we cannot abandon their children. We cannot abandon their women. We cannot abandon them. We cannot abandon our people, especially when times are more difficult. That's when the real men and women have to stand. And as we go through these difficulties, I lost one of my best friends, one of my closest friends in an airstrike a few weeks ago. And as I was going through that difficulty, and we still are, you have to try to process your grief. When grief comes at you in all these different ways, you have to try to understand that grief so that you're not paralyzed. Someone will say, how are you able to function? Or how are you able to continue? And this isn't only in war. This is when you lose a mother or a father, or you lose a friend, you lose a beloved person. This is a question that's asked to the person, how will they continue? Because if they don't figure it out, they will fall into a depression that paralyzes them for a long time. In our religion, we are constantly told of the promise that everyone must ultimately face. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every individual soul will taste death. This is a promise, yet we act as if it's not coming towards us. It will definitely come towards us. And Allah has sent us the Prophet and the Imams to guide us on this way, so that when we finally go into the next world, we would have done our best in dunya. That dunya was the test for us. And the Imam has told us, مَا خُلِقْتُمْ لِلْفَنَاءِ. You were not created for perishing, to be perished. You weren't created and then left alone and then die and it's finished. بَلْ خُلِقْتُمْ لِلْبَقَاءِ. You were created to remain and to subsist forever. وَإِنَّمَا تَنْتَقِلُونَ مِنْ دَارٍ إِلَى دَارٍ. It is only a movement from one place to the next. This is the lesson of our religion. And this is a lesson that we need to take more seriously. And death, war, when it comes close to you, you start to take it more seriously. My teacher would always tell me, this world is a corridor. Would anyone place their sofa in the corridor or their TV in the corridor? No one sits in the corridor. The world's a corridor. That's all it is, dunya. Moving from one world to the next. This is not a living room. It's not a place where you can become comfortable. This is a place of trial and tribulation. The world in which we are tested individually. Forget the external results, where Allah will ask us, what did you do on an individual basis and for your society? So then this grief, how do I process this grief, this death that keeps coming close to me? I understand the concept in my mind, but then now it's here, and I can't allow myself to get paralyzed and break. I need to understand this grief so I can keep moving forward. Notice how when you watch all the different videos of children being annihilated, you are angry, you're hurt. You say, how could this happen? This is wrong. That's the type of grief, but you don't know them. If you lose one person, it hurts you a lot more when you know that person, when you have a relationship with that person, because of the personal connection that you have with that person. Does that mean that that person is more valuable than all those different people being annihilated? Of course not. But because you have a personal connection with that person, you feel it more. We need to understand this aspect in order to digest what grief is. If you've lost someone, you understand this. Grief can paralyze you, or you can channel it to keep moving in the memory of the one that you grieve. In the majalis of Ashura, when you imagine Karbala, when someone wants to be emotionally touched, one tactic people usually use is to imagine the story happening to their loved ones. So you imagine, for example, your own baby, or your niece, or your nephew, or a baby that you know, or your brother, or your sister. When you hear the story of Sayyidah Zainab, or Fadl Abbas, or whoever it may be, you try to take yourself to that place by imagining the face of your loved one on the face of the person in Karbala. Because it's natural for you to start to gravitate toward crying when you think of the person that you love. Because it becomes personal. Of course, at a higher level, your ma'rifah of Ahlul Bayt, you don't need to do that. But for normal people, this is a fine way to get yourself to be emotional for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Because of that personal connection, we want to understand that grief. But that grief can end up paralyzing us when we don't understand it correctly. When you see in Dua Abu Hamza Thamali, the Imam says, Allahumma akhrij hubba dunya min qalbi. Lord, remove the love of dunya from my heart. It seems that the grief is the expense that you pay to remove the love of dunya from your heart. I've never hated dunya as much as these days, because I saw how much of a liar it was. Everyone that went had dreams. Everyone that went had loves and families and children. Their children are not better than my children, and their women are not better than my women, and he's not better than myself. And how come he goes and he sacrifices and gives, and now he's widowed his wife and he's orphaned his children, and I'm supposed to think only of myself? Of course not. I see the world for what it is, and dunya is this way. That Allahumma akhrij hubba dunya min qalbi is a great dua. It's a heavy dua. It's a dua, if you want to understand it, there's an expense that you have to pay, because there's pain and grief. But then you understand that this is a blessing and a grace, because Rasulullah has told us that hubba dunya ra'su kull khati'ah. The love of this world is the head of every wrong. And the cure of the love of this world is dhikrul maut, memento mori, the remembrance of death. That's what reminds you that this world isn't yours to keep forever. That this world is a movement, the corridor, as we mentioned. Even our dear beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi, when he was moving through the town of Abwa, and he went past the grave of his mother, he stopped and he sat. He was about 55 years old at this point, 50 years after his mother died in front of him. He was 6 years old when she died. He sat down and he started to weep. A 56-year-old man weeping. His companions sat down around him and said, Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying? He said, my mother is buried here. And he cries and weeps, and they began to cry and weep. This is a natural part of life and the human journey of losing those we love and weeping for them and grieving for them. But we need to understand the grief in order for it not to destroy us, because there's a positive way that I remember death. It doesn't have to be morbid. It doesn't have to be remembrance of death means that I cannot enjoy anything in life. It's quite the contrary. When you digest how temporary life actually is, then you appreciate every single moment you have in the temporary abode. You no longer take those moments for granted. They begin to mean a lot more to you. But when you are paralyzed by the grief, then yes, it's negative. Then you fall into depression. Then it destroys you. And it's a pain unlike other pains. Your brain cannot fathom that the person that you love, that person you have that relationship with, your brain cannot fathom that they are no longer here. Your brain is reaching out to them. I remember Sayyid Asad, may Allah bless his soul, last year, I kept trying to call him. I knew that he had passed away. But I kept listening to the voice notes. I kept hearing his voice talking to me. How? I kept trying to call him. This is a normal process of grieving. Because you believe the person is still there. Your brain knows of a personal connection. It's like someone who is hungry or thirsty, reaching out for food or water. And it's right in front of them. And you've been 3-4 days without food, but you can't grab the food. It's torture. Your mind knows you're hungry. The food's right in front of you, but you can't grab it. You can't take it. And you feel that day after day after day. And it's excruciating. This is part of grieving. The brain doesn't yet understand. It doesn't know the person is missing. It only understands the personal connection. There are 3 dimensions to this grief. The personal relationship that I just spoke about, but also where the person is and when you're going to see them again. That's why when you take your beloved to the airport, I remember when the war began in Lebanon, I took my wife and daughter to the airport. They had to leave and I didn't want to leave. And I said goodbye. And I knew I would see them again in 2 months. So I'm sad. I'm sad because I can't see my beloved. But I know in 2 months I will see them. So time frame, that's when I see them again. God, if Allah allowed us to. And where would they be? Whether in Europe or America, I would know, okay, so that's 2 plane rides away. That's 20 hours away. So then my mind places them. I have a personal connection. My mind places them in a place that I know takes me this long to get to. And this is when I would see them again. That's why you might go 2 days, you don't see your family. You're at work on a business trip. Or from morning to night, you didn't see your family. You went to work, they were asleep. You came back home, they're sleeping. But you don't feel that sadness, you miss them. But you don't feel that sadness because you know they're so close. They're half an hour away, 40 minutes away. When will I see them? I'll see them tonight. Even if they're sleeping, they're breathing, I'll look at them, I'll see them, I receive pleasure. But when I don't see them, this is the way the brain works, even if they're not speaking to you. Yani, your brain, even if you're not sharing moments, it just feels comfortable to know they're there. It feels comfortable to know you can go see them. But what happens when someone dies? When someone you love and you have a personal relationship dies, the brain doesn't know where to place them. What do you mean they're dead? Where is dead? When will I see them again? I don't understand not seeing them again. That doesn't work in the mind. The brain is used to taking time away but reuniting. So then when someone loses a beloved, they start to go through all these different stages of grief, like denial, because they cannot accept. The map of their brain doesn't understand this person is no longer here. You can't place them anywhere, and you're not going to see them in this world anymore. Then pain comes along. The only way to be able to rectify the problem of the pain that we feel when we lose a beloved is to remap the brain. To remap the brain in a way that we can channel it so that we no longer fall into the paralysis and we still feel close to the beloved. How is it that we can remap it? Think of your life and all your different relationships. In all of your relationships, they have constantly changed. When you were a child, you were with your brothers and sisters and your mother and your father. If Allah blessed you with that family. You grew up, those were your main characters, the main people in your life. As the years went on and you grew up, your siblings grew up, everyone started to go down their own path. Your parents, statistics tell us that 80% of the time you spend with your parents is done before the age of 16. Because after that, you start to develop your own life. You start to go to university, college, you meet someone, you get married, then you have your own children. Suddenly, the main characters of the first stage of your life become side characters. They're still very important to you, but you don't see them very often. When I moved to Hausa, I only saw my parents 2 or 3 weeks a year. After living with them and seeing them every single day. That's the sunnah of life. My sister's married, she lives in Australia now with her husband. The sunnah of life, Sydney. I'm not going to go to Sydney very often. So we'll see each other once every year, twice a year. But we used to see each other every day. Life is this way. Then what about your friends? The friends you had in school, where are they now? Sometimes we're blessed to still have 2 or 3 main friends. But usually that friend group changes by the era. Every era in your life has a new friend group. Then you have children. Then your children are your main characters. And your spouse is your main character. Your whole life is about putting food on their table and taking care of them and paying for their education and tuition. Then they grow up and they move on. And they start their own lives as well. And so one day, even if it's only you and your spouse or you and your parents, one day will come where they will leave you or you will leave them. This is the haqiqah and the sunnah of life that we don't like to acknowledge, that people, human beings feel uncomfortable acknowledging, but this is dhikrul maut in reality. All the main characters keep changing. Only one main relationship remains. There is only one relationship that stays the same. From when you are in the cradle, He is with you. And when you are on your deathbed, He is still with you in the same way. Closer to you than your jugular vein. He hears you whenever you call Him. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam says to him in Dua Arafah, Ya sahibi fi wahdati. My friend, in my loneliness. He said to Allah, you are my friend in my loneliness. Dua Arafah tells you of the type of relationship Allah intended for this creation. Allah, the one who I have a relationship with that is beyond time and place. Allah is not in any place that I place Him there. He's not in any time by which I see Him again. Allah is with me from the cradle to the grave, before the before and after the after. Allah never left me for a second. In Ashura, when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is making his final stand by himself, and the swords are raining down upon him, and he is wounded from head to toe, he calls out his final words, Allahumma muta'ali al-makan, azim al-jabarut, شديد المحال غني عن الخلائق عظيم الكبرياء قادر على ما تشاء. He's speaking to Allah, and not any words. These words are of the most beautiful words. He's praising God in his final moments. He wants his final breath to be in praise of Allah, his greatest companion. Ya sahibi fi wahdati. He felt him in those moments. He felt Allah's presence in those moments. When we say ma ra'aytu illa jamila, I saw nothing but beauty, in those words of our great Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, she wasn't just speaking something that was a poem or a metaphor. Allah huwa al-jamil. Allah is beauty. She saw nothing but Allah. Allah was there with her before and after and in. This is how they are able to channel everything. How do they channel the grief of Karbala? How? How do they channel the grief of heads on spears? How do they channel the grief of a small girl given the head of her father? How? Except with complete faith and conviction in God. Not slogans, not quotes, real experience and sacrifice. And they live this. So when I want to understand grief in my life, then I take that relationship, the person who I lost, the beloved who I lost. Where do I place them? I remap my brain. I have to place them with the relationship that does not rely on a physical place. When will I see them again? With the relationship that does not rely on another appointment in the future. A relationship that is permanent, that I feel always with me, everywhere. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With Allah. The way that I imagine my relationship with God, the way in which Allah is not in a place or in a time, that beloved, I take them there. Will I still feel pain? Of course. But you'll be able to function. And you'll be able to grieve. And you'll be able to channel the lessons of the Quran and of Rasulullah and his holy family in a positive way, in which you take this grief and you channel it into love. Into love in the service of your people, in the defense of your people, in being a voice for the voiceless, in speaking a word of truth in the face of a tyrant, out of love for your people, not relying on hatred for your enemy, but from love, being inspired by your lost beloved, taking strength from his or her soul to continue on this path, so that when you see them again in the world to come, when Allah reunites you and you feel victorious, like Imam Ali alayhi salam was victorious when he moves into the next world, and you see them and you could say, you did everything you possibly could. You did not live a life that was selfish. You didn't live a life that was just for you. You lived a life that was intentional. And this is coming for all of us. The heartbreak of dunya is coming for all of us. Why not be intentional and go towards what Allah wants me to go towards with a heart of courage and valor? And so I wanted to recite the hadith in which I've recited here before, but I found it customary to recite with this occasion the hadith Qudsi, my favorite hadith Qudsi, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Man talabani wajadani. He who searched for me found me. He who searched for me found me. So all you have to do is say you want him. As soon as you say you want Allah, that means sacrifice though. That means you have to sacrifice. People think, is that easy? Yeah, just want Allah. But that means if you want Allah, you have to live by Allah's laws. You have to be of His most loyal, that takes sacrifice. It's not the easy way out that people like to take, the cheat codes. If you search for him, you'll find him. Man talabani wajadani. وَمَنْ وَجَدَنِي عَرَفَنِي. And he who found me knew me. وَمَنْ عَرَفَنِي أَحَبَّنِي. And he who knew me loved me. وَمَنْ أَحَبَّنِي عَشِقَنِي. And he who loved me had ishq for me. Ishq is deeper than just love. Ishq is bewildered by the love. That's why it's channeled into love. Complete ishq. وَمَنْ عَشِقَنِي عَشِقْتُهُ. He who has ishq for me, I have ishq for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the cosmos, the king of all kings, says, when my servant has ishq for me and sees nothing but me and devotes himself to me, then I have ishq for my servant. What does that mean for Allah to have ishq for his servant? He said, وَمَنْ عَشِقْتُهُ قَتَلْتُهُ. And the one who I have ishq for, I kill. When we think of qatl and death, killing, it's scary. But of course, the love of Allah does that to the one he loves because it's Allah's love. How can you stand in the way of Allah's love? It will completely encompass you. There would be no more you. You are encompassed by his love. And Allah has laid down the law. And he said, if one kills, there is blood money that must be paid. There's a recompense that must be paid, a diya. So Allah says, وَمَنْ قَتَلْتُهُ فَعَلَيَّ دِيَّتُهُ. The one who I kill, I pay his diya. I will take care of his recompense. My love killed him. He searched for me, found me, knew me, loved me, had ishq for me, so I developed ishq for him. And my ishq killed him, so the responsibility is on me to pay the recompense. Tayyib, what's the recompense, Ya Allah? What's the diya? He says, وَأَنَا دِيَّتُهُ. I am the recompense. I give him myself. And when you understand Karbala in light of such a hadith, and you understand the station of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the one who was completely in love with Allah, and so Allah was completely in love with him. That's why he gives him this such high station, that if you go under his dome and you pray, he grants it, and one tear for him and you have salvation. This is not a coincidence. This is because of Allah's love for Abu Abdullah. Rasulullah is Habibullah, the beloved of Allah. And he said, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn. Allah, he said, Hussein is from me. I am from Hussein. He's Habibullah. Hussein's Habibullah. Habibullah that Allah loves, this is what he gives him. And we are the ummah of Habibullah. And so, we are the ummah, yes, of tears. We are the ummah of heartbreak. We are the ummah of love, the ummah of sacrifice, the ummah of courage, the ummah of honor. And raise our heads high. Because when the rest of the world was quiet, the Shia of Ali bin Abi Talib stood up and said, Labbaika ya Hussein. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا ابن رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا مظلوم يا غريب يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا After the battle of Karbala, Bishr the poet entered Medina and began to recite the poetry for Imam al-Hussein. He told the people of the tragedy of Karbala, on what occurred on that day. And the woman came from far, she saw the crowd, and she entered the crowd, and she stopped Bishr and said, "Oh man, tell me what happened to my son Hussein." Bishr was confused and didn't recognize the lady. And the people told him, "This is Baneen, the mother of Abu Fadl al-Abbas." Bishr lowered his head and his complexion changed. And he said, "Ya Matallah, my condolences to you on the death of your son Aoun." She said, "I did not ask about my son Aoun. I only asked about Hussein. Ya Matallah, my condolences to you on the death of your son Jafar." She responded, "I did not ask you about my beloved Jafar. I asked you about my son Hussein." He responded, "Ya Matallah, my condolences to you on the death of your son Abdullah." The mother of those three shuhada responded, "I did not ask you about Abdullah. I only ask you about Hussein." And he called out, "Ya Matallah, my condolences to you on the death of your son Abbas." She responds, "Oh man, you've broken my heart into 1,000 pieces. I did not ask you about Abbas. I only ask you about Hussein." And he called out, "Your son Hussein قتل عطشانا في كربلاء." Your son Hussein was slaughtered thirsty by the river Euphrates. Mawlaya Aba Abdullah, your body remained under the sun for 3 days without a kafan. Your skin burned by the sun, your clothes taken, your head detached from your body, your chest sunken by the hooves of the horses. Ya Mawlai, what is a world in which your head lays on a spear? Mawlai, may it have been my chest instead of your chest. May it have been my head instead of your head. لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين إلى يوم القيامة. صلوات.